What would you do if, on the coldest night of your life, you discovered your very existence was nothing more than a ritual sacrifice and offering to something older than time itself? Would you fight against the impossible? Or would you surrender, letting fate claim you as it has so many before? For centuries, I have lived with that questione curse disguised as a story, echoing in the bones of the earth. Tonight, I'll tell you how a single act of fear and superstition unleashed an evil so deep that even hell would shudder to face it. Welcome to Tales Mythology, where we unearth legends that the world tried to bury. Stories of vampires are as old as humanity itself. Most see them as monster symbols of our deepest fears, death, the unknown, our own forbidden hunger. But beneath every myth is a grain of truth, and behind every monster, there's a human story, a moment when choice and fate collide. I was not born a king, a god, or a hero. I was born to die. My village had no walls, no gods, only tradition. We farmed, we bled, we buried our dead. But every year, when winter turned the moon black, we chose a sacrifice. That year, the honor of the Kusu is mine. My father had long ago vanished, unwilling to love what the mountain would one day take. My mother's eyes were stone. I was marked, wrapped in blood-red silk, and led into the forest. Let's pause here. Ritual sacrifice is a theme that runs through every culture, from the Aztecs to the Druids, from ancient Egypt to the high peaks of the Himalayas. The idea that one must die so others may live is woven into our oldest stories. But what does it do to appear to a child when survival means offering up your own? Anthropologists say rituals like these bind communities, turning fear into order. But I remember only the terror of that night, forest howling in a language only the dead could understand. Even the trees seemed to recoil as I was brought higher, up the jagged slope toward the altar. They laid me on cold stone, expecting a quick end. But death is rarely so simple in the old tales. Instead of oblivion, I was flooded with visions, memories not my own. Skies burning, oceans boiling, beasts with coal red eyes, and a man always alone hiss, hands stained by the blood of his own children. When I awoke, the world had changed. The elders were gone, the silk stiff with black frost, and the stone beneath me was no longer cold, but almost alive. I was not dead. I was something else. When I returned to my village, silence fell like a heavy shroud. No one met my eyes. Children clung to their mothers. My own mother locked herself away, her grief turning to stone. I had crossed a threshold once offered, never reclaimed. The world felt changed, and so did I. My skin grew paler each day, my breath cold, my heart slower. I no longer felt hunger for bread or thirst for water. Instead, an emptiness grew inside me, hunger that was at once new and ancient, echoing through every bone. To be marked as different is to be exiled in plain sight. Throughout history, societies have found ways to push their fears onto simian outsiders, scapegoats, those who don't quite belong. My transformation is a mythic reflection of this ancient practice. Modern psychologists talk about social death, the feeling of being invisible, shunned, or erased. For me, it was literal. I had become a spectre in my own home, feared even by those who once loved me. It was a simple act. A village dog, half wild, bit my arm. Instead, the blood that spilled sizzled on the earth, black and steaming. The dog yelped, and mothers called their children away. It was the last time I would ever feel pain. From that moment, everything changed. My hair stopped growing. My skin turned the color of bone. Days blurred into weeks, then into months. Time lost its meaning, and my hunger grew sharper, colder, gnawing at my insides like winter wind. Only one person dared approach me. A blind old woman, forgotten by the village, but feared for her wisdom. She told me, "You are not cursed. You are a lock, and something waits to be opened." Her words haunted me. In myths, blindness often means insight. The Greeks had Tiresias, the blind seer. In Norse legend, Odin gave his eye for wisdom. Was her blindness a symbol? Was she warning me about what was trapped inside me or what I might unleash? One night, the hunger became unbearable. I fed first on a lamb, then a bird, desperate not to hurt a human. But hunger cannot be bargained with. Eventually, I fed on a man not out of malice, but out of a desperate need to feel alive. Each time, the act brought both relief and horror. The old tales say vampires are evil by nature, but I learned that monstrous acts are often born from monstrous pain. Let's reflect for a moment. Vampirism in folklore is often a metaphor for a contagion, addiction, or trauma. Bram Stoker's Dracula was written during an era of Victorian anxieties about disease, sexuality, and the unknown. My story, too, is about a curse that spreads, but also about how trauma, left unhealed, can ripple through generations. In real life, many who suffer profound pain end up passing it on, often unconsciously. It's the cycle of hurt people hurting people, a pattern as old as humanity. The elders, seeing what I had become, chained me to stone and buried me beneath the mountain's roots. I was entombed, forced into a sleep that lasted centuries. Time passed, civilizations rose and fell, and I dreamt of nothing but hunger. When I awoke, the world was changed. My village was gone, swallowed by forest. Only bones and moss remain, a testament to the unrelenting march of time. Centuries slipped by in the darkness beneath the mountain. When I finally awoke, the world was unrecognizable. The village was gone, erased by time, swallowed by wild forest. Ruins lay scattered beneath moss, a few broken stones where my home once stood, nameless gravestones toppled by roots. Loneliness is its own kind of hunger. I wandered the woods, feeding on wild animals to survive. Their blood was cold and thin, never enough to silence the ache inside. Sometimes I imagine the forest itself remembered me, shadow gliding beneath ancient trees, neither living nor dead. There's a special kind of grief that comes from outliving your entire world. Imagine waking up and discovering that everything you once loved, your family, your culture, even your language, has vanished. For those who've lost homes, survived disasters, or immigrated far from everything familiar, this sense of displacement will resonate. In many ways, my journey is about that search for belonging, of the loss, a universal theme, found in refugee stories, tales of exile, and in the quiet, invisible battles fought by people every day. One day, as the river whispered through stone, I found a cottage with smoke rising from its chimney. There lived a Helera woman with eyes both gentle and fierce, who welcomed the wounded and the lost. Unlike the others, she did not fear the darkness that clung to me. She saw past the hunger and the pallor, offering bitter herbs and soft words. "You are not a demon," she said. "You are broken, but not evil." For a brief moment, I believed her. It's tempting to think love can fix anything. Fairy tales often end at happily ever after, but real stories are more complicated. Sometimes love is a bomb. Sometimes, for the broken, it's a razor's edge. Psychologists talk about redemption relationships, the hope that someone's care can transform us. But when we carry unhealed wounds, we risk hurting those who try to save us. My love story is a warning that even the deepest affection can be consumed by unaddressed darkness. The hunger never left me. One night, in a moment of weakness, I gave in. The scent of her blood was fire in my veins. I tried to flee, to protect her, but the monster inside was stronger. When I came to, she lay dead in my arms, her eyes full of sorrow, not fear. I thought the dawn would burn away my sign. Instead, she rose pale, empty, with no memory except hunger. She became like me, and in her confusion, she killed another. The curse spread, first to a neighbor, then to a stranger. The forest filled with pale-eyed predators. I realized too late, every act, every choice, echoes far beyond ourselves. We all leave marks on the world. Sometimes, our actions ripple out, hurting people we never meet. In psychology, this is known as the cycle of trauma, pain passed from parent to child, from generation to generation. Like the vampire's curse, the damage can multiply in ways we never intend. As the curse spread, fear took root. Villagers armed themselves, fire and steel in hand, hunting those they once called neighbor. I watched helplessly as the woman I'd loved, a creature of hunger, set the village ablaze. Her laughter echoed through the burning night. a mockery of the warmth we'd once shared. I fled into the wild, pursued by nightmares of what I had unleashed, tormented by guilt and hunger. I wandered until I found the ruins of a monastery, hidden deep within the mountains. Rage built inside me, force even older than my hunger. In a fevered trance, I carved a circle in stone, reaching deep within to tear the fury from my soul. What emerged was a shadow, alive and formless, bearing my own eyes. Its scream split the night, and men across the land fell to the ground, twisting, changing, their flesh warped into fur, their hands into claws. These were the first werewolves, born not of blood, but of rage itself. Unlike me, they could walk in the sun. Unlike me, they hunted my kind. This is where legend meets psychology. In myth, monsters often spring from human philosophy, anger, despair. The werewolves were my rage incarnate, just as vampires were my hunger. It's a lesson. When we refuse to face our darkest emotions, they find other ways to escape, often in destructive forms. The night the werewolves were born, the world changed forever. My children vampires I had cursed into hunger found themselves hunted by these new beasts of rage. Unlike us, the wolves remembered only pain. They were not driven by bloodlust, but by something more primal, vengeance, grief, loss twisted into violence. The first battlefield was the Valley of Oris. Flames lit up the night as vampires burned, while the wolves tore through us with fang and claw. The war had no sides, only victims. Humanity watched from afar, powerless and terrified. They called it the Splitten Age of Monsters, a war written in legend, but etched into the earth with fire and blood. If you look closely, you'll see this war everywhere. In myth, it's monsters. In our world, it's cycles of revenge, trauma passed down, violence begetting more violence. From the Hatfields and McCoys to rival nations locked in endless strife, the tragedy is always the same. Those hurt most deeply often hurt others in turn. Some cultures even believed that such wars weren't just between humans, but between spirits, or told as psychic echoes of collective trauma. In our tale, the monsters are literal, but their origin is all too human. For centuries, I tried to stop the war one had unleashed. I begged both sides' creatures I had once called my children, and those born of my reject to remember who they once were. Most couldn't. The past was drowned in pain. I became a witness, a wanderer in burned-out cities and silent graveyards. No longer king, no longer monster, just a shadow remembering everything. There's an old saying, those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. In trauma therapy, bearing witness, giving voice to the unspeakable is a step toward healing. My journey as a witness is a mythic version of this process, carrying memory, so that others might one day be free of its burden. One night, deep beneath stone and earth, I found a council of vampire elders older than nations, their faces lost to time. They showed me a scroll, soaked in blood, a warning. Something older than us all had awakened. A doorway opened, and from it stepped a figure, pale, blindfolded, shackled in runes. He didn't speak. His presence was an ache in the world, a silence that seemed to swallow the air itself. When he vanished into the shadows, the earth trembled, the sky cracked, and I felt a new hunger rising agony that was not my own. Every culture tells stories about ancient, sleeping evil forces we try to bury or deny, but which inevitably return. Psychologists call this the shadow, the parts of ourselves or our history we repress until, unchecked, they explode in destructive ways. In this story, that shadow takes on a cosmic scale. The evil is not just a monster, but a force of forgetting, of cycles unbroken. As the blindfolded figure's power spread, the world itself began to break. Oceans rose, forests burned, cities drowned. The bloodlines I'd created, vampires and werewolves, alike turned to ash. It wasn't victory, it was annihilation. Yet even as destruction raged, I found myself at the center, a witness to the end, but also to the possibility of a new beginning. Myth teaches that before rebirth, there must be destruction, the flood before new land, the fire before green shoots. It's a painful truth in life, too. Sometimes, what's broken must fall away before healing can begin. But here's the deeper lesson. When we refuse to confront our own darkness, whether as people or as a society, eventually it confronts us, sometimes gently, sometimes with cataclysm. When the storm of annihilation passed, silence returned, but it was not peace. The world felt hollow, emptied of voices. My footsteps echoed through ruined villages, across fields where nothing grew. Where laughter once lived, only wine remained. Grief and guilt weighed on me heavier than any chain. The monsters I'd created, vampires, werewolves, were gone, their bloodlines turned to dust. I walked through places that had once meant something, the stones of my childhood home, now crumbling. The chapel where once I'd sought forgiveness, now empty, but full light filtering through shattered glass. Loss changes us. It's not just about what is gone, but what remains, the emptiness, the memories, the question of whether healing is possible. For anyone who's lost family, a community, or even a version of themselves, the ache of absence is a familiar shadow. But grief can be more than pain. In many cultures, mourning is both a goodbye and a path toward new meaning. My journey through the wasteland was a walk through that in-between between despair and the faint hope of something more. One night, in the ruins of a village swallowed by ash, I found something unexpected. A child, thin and silent, huddled by a dying candle. Their eyes were too wide for their face, their hands trembling but alive. I knelt, offering my hand. For a long moment, the child only stared, seeing something in Mephia, maybe, or the memory of monsters. But finally, they took my hand, and together we stepped out into the pale dawn. This is where myth meets real life again. Hope is not always loud. Sometimes it's just a hand held out in the darkness, a small act of kindness after all else has failed. Survivors of trauma, disaster, walk know that hope doesn't erase scars, but it can plant seeds where the world thought nothing could grow. We wandered through a land slowly healing. Grass pushed up through cracks in the earth. Rivers ran clear again. We found a valley untouched by the destruction, where birds sang and deer watched from the trees. In the center, a small wooden house leaned beneath the weight of time. We made it a home and not a fortress against the past, but a place to grow. I learned to chop wood, to plant seeds, to mend broken things. The child no longer a victim, but a survivor, Lord again, chasing chickens and building dreams from the ashes. It's tempting to imagine that healing is a moment, a magical reversal of pain. But real healing is slow, imperfect, built from patience and daily care. Therapists call this post-traumatic growth, not a return to what was, but the creation of something new from what remains. Our valley was not paradise, but it was a beginning. But the world, like memory, never forgets its scars. One night, the air shifted. The trees leaned in, the birds fell silent, and the moon bled faintly. Far away, something ancient stood, a shadow with burnt-out eyes, wrapped in rags stitched with runes. As it walked, the world withered, grass curled to ash, rivers slowed to nothing. The child stood beside me, hands steady, unafraid. We climbed the mountain to an ancient tree whose roots held the bones of all I'd been. As the shadow reached for us, we knelt, pressing our palms to the earth. The spiral carved beneath the tree flared with light, memory burning brighter than fear. The shadow faltered, trembling before the force of what it had never known: Rembrandt's forgiveness. It dissolved into silence, its curse broken. Every family, every society carries old wounds. The cassette where the trauma, hatred, or despair does not end just by forgetting, but by facing it together with courage and compassion. This is the real magic of stories. They show us not just how darkness spreads, but how it can finally be put to rest. The valley thrived. The child grew into an adult, planting new trees beside the old ones. The shadow of the mountain faded, and for the first time in centuries, I felt at peace. In my final days, I watched the sunrise shimmer on the lake, feeling myself fab not as a monster, but as a witness, a memory, a blessing for what would come after. The story does not end with me. Beyond the mountains, beneath the sea, old eyes may still watch, but the world is made new by those who remember, and those who dare to break the cycle. So what is the lesson, buried beneath the blood and ashes? That even in the darkest myths, There is a way forward, not by denying our shadows, but by facing them, by remembering, forgiving, and choosing to build again own day. One act of kindness, one new life at a time. That is how legends end and how new ones begin.